How can that be resolved? That seems like an almost unending problem as far as we've discussed it on this particular show.
Well, the population of those countries have to deal with it themselves with some external support. In most cases, when the population feels empowered by some outside forces, then they can rise up against a regime they feel is oppressive. In the African context, while the population would like to see their leaderships in some of those countries where the leaders have been there for 20, 30 years or so removed, they lack the necessary leadership to accomplish that. In most of those countries, you barely have a middle class. And in most revolutions, the middle class is always the leader. The class that has some and wants more, and the class, that is educated, is the middle class. Now, what you have in Africa is the upper class and the lower class. Right. The lower class is busy trying to sustain itself, trying to have 2-3 square meals a day, than thinking of whom to overthrow. So that middle class that always ferments problems is lacking there. And that has been the policy of Clinton and Obama, is to build an African middle class. And that middle class has to be built and sustained by education. And one of the things most of the African leaders who came to power early, and even those who are in power now, is that most of them are not interested in building schools and having the population well educated. And you understand what that means. When a population starts getting very literate, then they start fighting for their rights because they know what it is. So what is happening in most African countries is that the population is not very literate to even understand what is happening. They still see corruption as stealing government money, not knowing that that government is them, is their tax dollars. Okay, so these things are some of the things that a strong, educated middle class can see and decide that there has to be change. We don't have that middle class there now, that apart from probably South Africa, but other countries you don't have that. So it's a very big problem. So that has been, the result of lack of educational opportunities for most of the masses after those who came to power and now. So that has to be done. That's why the Obama administration and Clinton administration has been emphasizing the need for training of more Africans in jobs and every other thing as a way of creating a viable middle class that can be able to articulate the country's future. Now, secondly, the tribal makeup of a lot of those countries makes change very difficult, even though I know in the future it will change. For example, Obama is not going to Kenya. A lot of people are saying, well, why is he bypassing Kenya? Why is he not going over there? There are two reasons. Probably one is because of Uhuru Kenyatta, the current president, who is under indictment by the International Criminal Court, for those riots after the election a few years ago. So it will not be appropriate from
the president of the United States,
from the diplomatic point of view for the president to be seen hugging him. And secondly, this is my hunch, is that Obama comes from an ethnic group in Kenya called the Luo. The Luos have always complained about the domination of the Kikuyu. Okay? Now the Kikuyu have been in power for long, apart from Daniel Arap Moi, who is a Kalenjin. All presidents of Kenya have been Kikuyus. Kenyatta was Kikuyu. Kibaki, Kikuyu. Kenyatta, now Uhuru Kenyatta is Kikuyu. So apart from Daniel Arap Moi, who is Kalenjin, Luos have never held the position of president, even though they have accomplished politicians who are good enough to hold it. First, you have Jaramogi Odinga, and then his son, current Prime Minister Raila Odinga, and Tom Mboya, who was assassinated. He was also a Luo. All of them were contestants for the presidency, but one way or the other, they managed to disappear. So the Luos are resentful. So if Obama visits Kenya now, the Luos might interpret it as empowering them, okay, to start more political agitation.
He could create more problems than he can bring about here.
Exactly.
Within the context of those rivalries between the ethnic
exactly,
groups.
and those rivalries and all this. Yeah, the population might feel that, you know, he's empowering them to go out and keep agitating. You saw what happened when Wateja went to Poland. That's the former Pope John Paul II. His original name was Karol Wateja. So when he went to Poland, when Solidarity and their group were agitating against the military government of General Jaruzelski. After the Pope came, it empowered them to to start more trouble, and that led to the overthrow of Jaruzelski's regime. So Obama going to Kenya might empower the Luos to start making more problems, you see, because at times some of these African countries still feel as if they are protectorates. You know what I mean? So if Obama goes there now, the Luo community might think, you know, fine, that's their protector. America is not the protector of the Luos in Kenya. And you know how an illiterate population can interpret things. The most educated ones will understand it has nothing to do with him being Luo. But the ordinary person on the street.
That's important to them.
Exactly.
If you see it from an ethnic perspective, it's going to be an ethnic perspective in spite of what the reality might be.
Exactly. That symbol alone, the symbolism of it, not the reality of it, can create problems around there. And it's not only in Kenya you have Luo-speaking people. You have the Acholis and all the rest, some of who are oppressed in their own countries, are also Luo-speaking in Uganda and South Sudan. So that might start creating a regional problem. The Luos might start thinking, well, we better get together now and do something about power in the various countries where we exist. So that's a very important, you know, thinking there.
So, Dr. Madu, it seems that this is a never-ending ethnic struggle, and I think that in a real sense, it really grows out of colonialism in a real sense, because I think you've indicated that they've got different groups that are divided by boundaries and et cetera, and et cetera. And you're going to have to give our audience more information in reference to that, because I think that, and not necessarily on this show, but I think that that's one of the things that we want to talk about in the future. For example, I think that a topic that sort of screams for some information is the Congo. What in the world is happening in the Congo in a real sense? Well,
the Democratic Republic of the Congo has been in chaos since the overthrow of President Mobutu. You know, apart from, you know, despite Mobutu's corrupt practices, one of his legacies will be keeping the Congo together. Exactly, he accomplished that. So we got to give him some credit. After his overthrow by Kabila and his group, that chaos, you know, returned to the Congo. And you remember Mobutu changed the name to Zaire, in order for people to forget about that name of the Congo. Exactly. So it's ironic that when he was overthrown, that name came back, and there's been chaos since then, like it was in the 1960s. See? So with all the riches of that country, it's now a kind of balkanized. You have Ugandans in some parts looting, you know, the resources of the country. You have Rwanda in some parts looting. You have Angola in some parts. You have Zimbabwe in some parts, because all these groups supported Kabila in his fight against Mobutu.
Now they've separated, and they're all trying to loot
exactly. Now they're trying to have their own separate enclaves to loot the country. And the central government in Kinshasa is not that strong enough, you know, to defeat these different armies that have congregated in the country.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Gadu, we're going to have you back to continue this conversation, but I think that this is the kind of information that our audience ought to be aware of. And we want to encourage you to tune in again next week to another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good night.